Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you, Books and Books, for allowing us to get together this Saturday night here in Coral Gables. This is an exciting event for us as publishers, as well as my introducing John Dufresne. I asked to introduce John because I am a Friday night writer for the past 3 years. Any Friday night writers here, by the way? Few hands. It should be more than that. Okay, good. We have a showing here. John has been very patient with those of us who are Friday night writers, not riders, writers. Okay. He has given up 2.5 decades of his Fridays to allow us to have our work critiqued, not only by him, but by our peers as well. And John's been a very patient person. He has encouraged us to publish. And for those of us who are writers, it's great when we have this rite of passage where we go from being the writer to the author. It's pretty special. So this is kind of a graduation night, kind of like a baccalaureate ceremony for the folks sitting at the front table right here, because they're all part of the Friday Night Writing Organization who have worked with John over these many years. And we as the publisher, which is Midtown Publishing, have collaborated with John on this through essentially through our publisher, Mike Zealy, who unfortunately couldn't make it at the last minute. We got a text and said, sorry, I have to bail out. He's got a flu bug and just couldn't make it tonight, I guess. But he extends his apologies. And so I was planning on speaking anyway. Okay. As part of the role that I have with Midtown Publishing is as we get to the end of the production of the book, we have that moment where we're all going to meet at Books and Books in Coral Gables and have a moment for the authors to speak. So it's my job to kind of let the rest of the world know that we're going to have this event tonight. So I sent out a press release to local media about John's appearance and the author's appearance here this evening. And I think it was around Wednesday, I sent a little blurb to a Facebook page, which is Miami Herald Books. And it's social media. One of the great things about social media is you never know what's going to happen in social media. You just put it out there. And what we saw was a very interesting response, all positive. And one of the people who responded says, John Dufresne, my hero. And funny thing, I'd heard that before on other social media commentary about John Dufresne. For those of us who are Friday night writers, every Friday night, John is our hero. And it gives me pleasure to introduce him. He is a hero in the literary scene in this quarter of the United States, and I hope you join with me in welcoming John to the presentation tonight. John?
Thank you. That was very sweet. I'm going to just be very brief because the stars are over here to our left, and two of the folks I will say couldn't make it. Christine is still stuck shoveling snow, I think, in New Jersey. Christine McRae and Jason Ellen, who makes his living playing poker in Las Vegas, but isn't doing all that well because he's told me he had to go to Colombia to get his teeth fixed. He couldn't afford it in the States. And I said, what the hell is wrong with your teeth? And he said he needed 10 crowns. I said, okay, I'll get it. I didn't ask the next question, why weren't you brushing all those years? But anyway, just a little bit about, we're going to have, after our readers, we'll have a question and answer for the readers and myself, if any, like that. If you have any questions about what we do and why we do it, maybe we can answer them. But just briefly, the Friday Night Writers Group began about 1990. And we began in a little hallway, and then we moved to a classroom where we couldn't hear each other. You've been in it for 16 years, so you were back in that classroom with the bad acoustics, and we finally got a proper place where we can hear each other and see each other, and it's much better now. But yeah, Gene's been 16 years in the group, and lots of people have come and gone. Some of our people who've been around for like Mark and Henry, who've been around for as long. In fact, Henry was in my first class that I ever taught at FIU, an introductory class in 1989 on the South Campus, and Henry was in that class, and he sat in the back. And when I gave my comments back to the first story, he asked me, "What are you, a doctor?" And I didn't get the joke. I didn't know what he was talking. What are you talking about? And he said, "No one can read your handwriting." Like, oh, okay. So, and I remember my first class, and yeah. And Henry's about to leave us and move to North Carolina, as Mark did. Anyway, so people come, people go, and new people come. Everybody's welcome, and it's free. We try to be generous with all our manuscripts, and generous means being honest and being specific and respecting the work and respecting the people, and we talk about it. And it's informal. It's not like a class where we do laugh and all that sort of thing, make fun of each other sometimes, and people are, of course, are welcome to come, and we'll just keep doing that. We do it in the spring. It'll end at the end of April this year because that's how the dates worked out, and then we'll pick up again, usually like a week after school starts, and we go to the end of the semester. We do that, and we just keep doing it. And despite what Roland said, it's not heroic work. I love it. It's just like I like doing it because I love stories and writing in general. We're not just fiction. We're nonfiction, poetry, plays, screenplays. This is how we talk about poetry. Okay, we got your poem. None of us knows anything about poetry, but we're happy to tell you what we think of what you wrote. But we feel more confident in prose area. But so anyone can come and bring your manuscripts. And your job is not only your job is to read everybody else's. So it's work. It's pleasurable work, and we learn from what works in stories and memoir and all that, and we learn for our own work what doesn't work, and it helps us see what's going on. So anyway, that's what we do. And Roland and Michael Zealy a couple of years ago, when they started Midtown Publishing, said, "Why don't you do an anthology?" And we did one, and we had a reading here, I don't know, a year ago or something like that. And Roland said, "Let's do another one." And so we did a second one, and I'm sure we'll continue to do more. And anybody who comes to the group can submit their material, and that's how it gets done. And we have to limit it to 6 because that's the budget. But there certainly were many more than 6 that were worth being published in this book. Anyway, so I'm going to just... we're going to go in the order the people are published in the book, show up in the book, and we're going to start with Peter. They can introduce themselves. In the back of the book, there's biographies of our writers. And I will say Peter is a molecular immunologist. He's the first one we've had in the book. And by trade. Wow. So what does that... you don't have to get an MFA to be a writer. You just have to write. You just have to do it, and you have to pay attention. I just, by chance, the other day, saw this little thing with Amy Hempel, who's a writer I admire, and I like her work. And she said, she was telling the interviewer, I'm not very imaginative. I'm not very creative. I pay attention. I was a reporter, and I learned how to find the salient images, she said. And it was like, you pay attention to the world. So that's what we try to do. So let's welcome our writers, and then you'll just come up and introduce yourselves, and when we're done, we'll talk some more. So Peter Denton will be first.
Thank you. The first Time that I was at the Friday Night Writers, Johnny pulled me aside and he said, if you want to make it in this business, find a good hairdresser. And I hope, and I hope that's reflected. Okay, the title is Revenge is Wild Justice. Susie Q speaks. I was in the market for a boyfriend. Meeting Doug and spending the morning slip, sliding around was a good start. Certain cliches never lose their punch, and I had ended breathlessly saying, that was so good. I hope it was good for you. He replied with a grin so big it almost didn't fit his face. I'm not smart enough to plan very far ahead, but I'm shrewd and usually can make the best move on the board. I invited myself to breakfast and dressed for the occasion. I walked into IHOP where Doug had predictably already arrived. My crisp white cutoffs brought attention to the area where he had lately spent memorable moments. I am beautiful, but I don't take it for granted. Men look at your boobs, your butt, and your face in that order. Only connoisseurs check out your ankles. My breasts are big, which of course is the most important thing, but they don't pathetically erupt from my chest like silicone volcanoes. They have that gentle droop which guarantees that they're made from all natural ingredients. Doug was too much a gentleman to ask about my past, but I told him anyway. I came back early from a trip. My boyfriend, Brad, was passed out on our bed with an arm around some chubby slut. I tiptoed to the bed, gathered up her clothes and purse, jammed the stereo to high, and walked out. I was crying so hard I nearly fell down the stairs. Doug asked, what did you do with their things? Dropped them on the steps. That wasn't the exact truth. That sleaze had seriously pissed me off. I had taken the bills out of her wallet and threw her credit cards and everything else into a dumpster. Into a couple of hours, I came back. The only trace of Brad was moisture on the mattress. I paused. I've never been into one-night stands. He looked at me with his broad, strong farmer's face and said, neither have I. At least one of us was telling the truth. I said, tell me more about yourself. He adjusted his ball cap with the NRA logo and said, I come from Kiowa County in Colorado on the Kansas border. Our family owns a few thousand acres, sorghum and soybeans, that sort of thing. We run cattle on the North 400. The goddamn feds and our Nigerian president are trying to take that land and turn it into a goddamn prairie land park. It's already prairie land, and who the hell would want to visit it? I was losing the logic. That's terrible, but what does the NRA have to do with it? Sue, just think about it. I thought about it. We both believed that if a law didn't suit, break it. The difference was, if it didn't suit Doug, he was prepared to go a lot farther than I was. We were a good fit. I was slutty, he was nutty, and neither one of us was brainy. I had done okay in accounting and PE, but squeaked by in the required courses. Doug studied agronomy, which has something to do with farming. Mom used to ask me why I always needed more of everything I needed. Everyone wants more. Everyone faces obstacles. Unlike most people, I don't put unnecessary obstacles in my own way. Does a lion get weepy after he's eaten a gazelle? Of course not. Same for me. I do what needs to be done, never look back, and then do the next thing that needs to be done. Southern California is an expensive place to live, not because things cost more, but because people want more. The hippie days are over. A girl can't walk around wearing a paisley bedspread and no eyeliner. Imagine promenading on the beach wearing a Walmart bikini. We girls know whether it's high fashion or old fashion. It's simple. Dignity costs money. Now, I am to introduce Tim, and I will read from the book. Tim Curtis joined John Dufresne's Friday Night Writers 8 years ago. He has a nearly perfect attendance record. Thanks to spell check, he completed FIU's 3-year writing program in 5 years. The first draft of Sucks comprised entirely of the dream Vernon relates to his buddy sucked. He said it sucked because conflict in fiction can't be resolved via dreams. Many rewrites later, Sucks began to find its voice, and Tim eventually listened. In doing so, he realized that listening is important, but it's hard, real hard. Tim learns and forgets something every day. He claims he remains almost as smart as he was in high school.
If I'd have known that at the back of the book that it says right here, Tim Curtis sucks. You know, I might have rethought the title. Anyway. I hope you don't intend to wait out there all afternoon, young man. Mr. Della Puente's high-pitched voice echoed through the doorway. Even after a year on the job, Vernon was startled by the incongruency between Mr. Della Puente's voice and his girth. Della Puente was a fat little man renowned for his cheapness, which explained H&J Enterprises' low-end Office Depot decor and a thermostat locked on 78 degrees. 78-degree office that requires coats and ties is considered cruel and unusual punishment in Miami in August. He was also renowned for his long wisps of dyed black hair that meandered over and around his bald, glossy, white, cratered crown. And he was infamous for perpetually adjusting his package. The day Vernon was hired, Della Puente extracted his hand from his pants and offered it to seal the deal. According to office lore, Della Puente's foreskin was growing back at an alarming rate. And that young man shit, Vernon hated that. Hell, he was 30 years old, after all. Young man always indicated that Vernon was about to have his ass handed to him. Vernon stuck his head through the door and watched as Della Puente finished clipping and filing his nails. The dimly lit, seedy little room was lined with rusting metal file cabinets. Dominating the space was a huge institutional gray steel desk that made the two upright chairs facing it and Vernon's boss seem diminutive in scale. Della Puente swept the clippings onto the floor with the back of his hand, blew the filing dust in Vernon's direction, leaned back in his chair, and scowled. Vernon stepped inside and held his breath. Without looking up, Della Puente yelled, "You're fucking kidding me, right?" Vernon almost burst out laughing because that's what he was thinking. The fingernail cloud had dispersed, but Della Puente's office reeked. Vernon wiped his eyes, exhaled, and caught another rancid whiff of what he took to be a lethal mixture of BO, gingivitis, 7-Eleven burrito farts, and if he wasn't mistaken, a hint of ripe socks. It occurred to Vernon that personal hygiene was no longer personal once you left the house. Pointing to some papers on his desk, Della Puente said, "These numbers don't add up." Della Puente hadn't invited Vernon to sit, so he stood shifting his weight from foot to foot between the two chairs. "Well, actually, Jesus, I told you what I wanted." Sweat had begun to drip off Vernon's chin into the office's grimy purple and gold rug. A portrait of Mr. Della Puente's unpleasant-looking wife and generously proportioned daughter distracted Vernon. He thought, shouldn't it be facing Della Puente? "Well, listen, goddammit, this isn't rocket science. Just make the totals at the bottom of column A and column B the same. Otherwise, I lose money, and you're out of a job. You got that?" Della Puente took a deep breath, which caused his shirt buttons to strain under the pressure. Vernon adjusted his footing in case he needed to dodge a garment projectile. Della Puente's threat was nothing new, but it got Vernon's attention. He had a balloon mortgage payment looming on the horizon like a doomsday thundercloud that spit migraine-producing lightning bolts every time he thought about it. "So, if I understand you correctly, you're asking me—" "Asking? Asking? For Christ's sake, son, I'm not asking. I'm fucking telling you. Just do it." Hearing Della Puente invoke Nike's Just Do It slogan struck Vernon as odd. He'd never heard it applied to something as unscrupulous as what Della Puente was telling Vernon to do. Mr. Della Puente rose from his chair, squeezed his flabby belly around the desk, took Vernon by the elbow, and turned him towards the door. "No buts, pal. You understand me?" Standing in the hallway, Vernon turned and opened his mouth, intending to explain to his boss just how fucked up every August had been for the last 20 years, and how little sleep he'd been getting. But before he had a chance, Della Puente said, "You look like shit," and closed the door. Vernon walked numb-legged down H&J's worn, waxed, red and white checkered linoleum hallway, lined on either side with heavy-duty metal shelving, crammed with wooden crates. The sun's glare coming through the double-glass doors at the far end of the hall blinded him. For a moment, Vernon had that disquieting sensation. He was drifting down that long, narrow tunnel people reported seeing after a near-death experience. All right. That's just a little taste. The rest is awesome. The little part that preceded it, it's pretty good. I'm introducing Rosalind Caplis. 37, it was heaven, not sucks. Rosalind Caplis says that approaching her septuagenarian decade, she is transformed from a night owl to an early birder. A former art teacher in Miami's inner city, then volunteer guardian ad litem advocate for dependency court, she has always been a keen observer and copious note-taker. Now, as a first-time published author, her creativity has turned to crafting compelling stories, memoir, fiction, long and short, painting with words. A lot less messy, she says, than acrylic, and the real-life drama of her reports to the justice system. Her short story, 37, It Was Heaven, is based on an obituary, one of John Dufresne's favorite inspirations for quirky characters, irony, and the ultimate denouement.
Thank you. Okay. Everybody hear me? Okay. 37, It Was Heaven. Monty's stomach churns like the sprinkler pump. The garage door cranks open, revealing a brilliant morning glory purple and yellow sky. Last week, Barbie, his new girlfriend, planted the beauty vine near the canal, behind the house, next to the kidney-shaped pool. Monty winces, ignoring the persistent ache in his gut. Lamont Frederick Looper glosses over his discomfort, pretending he's in the same pristine condition as his 1937 ruby red Chevrolet. an impressive object from his birth year. He had bought the classic car at auction in Ocoee, Florida. Both Monty and his vehicle are 56 years old now, still looking great, but not as peppy as they used to be. In silk robe and white loafers, the Miami Herald tucked under his elbow, Monty wedges his way back through the garage between his everyday car, a new 94 tomato red Ford Mustang, tan rag top, and his just for fun car, the Beauty, the Chevy Roadster. When Monty starts the motor of his sweet Chevy, the carburetor, the choke, the cylinders and cam all have to be well oiled and fine-tuned. If anything is off, the honey doesn't run right. Monty is anxious, waiting to hear Dr. Mary Jo's diagnosis as to what exactly has been ailing him these past few months. Before he steps into the house, he shimmies past the metal shelves at the back wall and almost knocks the lid off one of the corrugated storage boxes. Opening the door to the house, the AC blast chills him. His Yorkie, Bitsy, with her bubblegum nails clicking, scampers behind him across the slippery travertine floor. Barbie coordinated Bitsy's nails to her satin bow. Also, Monty had allowed Barbie to install the damn new floors and window treatment. No, siree, he would not let Barbie redecorate his office. That's my domain, he mumbles. His other untouchables is his Cessna twin engine. He insists on maintaining his old values, his prime lecture to his sales seminar attendees. Closing the door to his hideaway office, he hibernates, organizing his day. He adjusts the wooden blinds so a honey glow angles across his retirement sanctuary. Below the window on the credenza, he inspects the keys of the Royal typewriter. The E, O, N, and M are almost worn away. He flaps a layer of dust off the keyboard with the end of his satin belt. Cosmic dust dances in the air. He coughs, collapsing in the leather desk chair, spins around to face the door. Thumbing through the folded newspaper, he searches the action line column, hoping they've answered his question. Which coffee is worse, decaf with formaldehyde or regular with caffeine? Barbie opens the office door and waves her pointer finger in the air like a serpentine dancer. Hello? Monty's preoccupied. She sachets past the spinning piano in her high-heeled slippers, twirling like a blonde runway model in pink lingerie trimmed with black lace. She delivers his coffee mug. She flits, kisses the back of his neck. Her sweet scent overwhelms. He doesn't mind until she places the hot mug right down on his monthly calendar. Then she hums in his ear, "Morning, honey bum. How about a pick-me-up?" He takes a tissue, blots the wet circle. "Same to you, honey-do. Want an oat bran muffin for breakfast, or can I toast whole wheat with cinnamon sugar if you like?" He continues down the column, sipping his black coffee. "Not yet. You sure?" He swivels the chair towards her. "Sit here, come closer." As he cradles her in his lap, she and the Java give him the jolt he needs. His stomach stiffens as he stifles a groan, but then recovers. He strokes her hair around her ear and reclines to shift her weight back. Whoa, they chuckle as he cups her breast. Bitsy growls, "Want a morning pick-me-up?" Barbie scoops up the dog and they lick. "Don't be jealous, little baby." Barbie takes the wet Kleenex and wipes goo from the dog's tear duct. Bitsy barks, "We're your little woman." Barbie purrs, licks Monty's ear, and massages his forehead and scalp. He closes his eyes and doesn't resist. Then he hears the sprinkler pump grind to a halt. As Barbie leaves his office, she stops at the door and winks at him. "I think I'll start on clearing the shelves in the garage. Go through the boxes of leftover merchandise for you to take to storage." "Maybe. We'll rendezvous later, honey bum." He flips through the stack of mail on his desk. "Sure, baby doll." She leaves, but her perfume lingers. He doesn't know why she puts up with him. He's crotchety, never gives her a straight answer. Maybe she tolerates him. Most of the other gals he was involved with, for however long or short, thought he was a barracuda. They'd either walk out in tears of fear, cut the line, or he'd chew them up. That's why he never married. He never learned to play the game. Look at his friend Sidney. He married, had 2 kids, divorced, lived with a dame who had 2 kids, split, then married a doctor from the Philippines, had another kid with her, and when Sidney lost his money, the latest wife divorced him. Marriage is social engineering. Love, honor, obey. Was Monty designed to love, honor, and obey? And now let me introduce my dear fellow writer, Jean Salisbury Campbell. Jean wrote her first play, The Unknown Chair, at age 8, in inquisitive response to the executions of Ethel and Julius Rosenberg. The show, deemed unfit for children, closed mid-act on her mid-first act on her grandmother's Main Street, Canisteo, New York front porch. Undaunted and full of even more questions, Jean continued to write for answers. Such inquisitiveness regarding her husband Doyle's childhood inspired Double Edge. Jean joined Friday Night Writers in 2002 and was later accepted into Florida International University's Creative Writing Program. Her work has been published in volumes of Chicken Soup for the Soul and Not Your Mother's Book. Here's Jean Campbell.
Hello. Wasn't I an odd child? Fixated on execution. Double Edge. In Lower Alabama, where I came up, everyone agreed that turning 13 meant becoming a man. No one said how it happened, though, so when my day arrived on the 28th of December, 1950, a gnawing fear set up in my stomach. I'd worked like a man since I was 8, always done a half a day's labor before the sun hit my back. Everybody did that, men, women, young and old. Shoot, I pulled my first baby sack through a cotton field at age 4, cleaning up the lower bits that tall people couldn't reach. But hard work never turned a boy into a man. In the country, hard work was just trying to get by. Being a man asked something more, something I hadn't yet unscrambled in my mind. Without knowing what that was, looking foolish scared me most. "Happy birthday, John Milton," my daddy said when he found me and my brother Grady Hugh at the water pump around back of the house. We'd finished chores and were cleaning up before breakfast. Daddy handed me a package no bigger than a pencil case, wrapped in brown paper and tied off with a string from the general store in Slocum, our nearest town 3 miles away. "From your mama and me," he said. Grady Hugh was 19, home on leave from the Army. He'd gotten the same thing when he turned 13, so I knew what it was. My heart sunk a little. But showing disappointment wasn't something any man did. No kid did either. I unwrapped my double-edged Gillette and nodded appreciation like it was a bicycle. Even though good sense let me know that razor would cut more than what pitiful few whiskers I had. Daddy meant that razor to slice clean into my childhood dreams and shake me wide awake. That was his way of saying, "You're grown, son." "Thank you, sir," I said. "Reckon I can use this." "Ha, you better practice without a blade," Grady Hugh said. He looked at my razor and laughed. At 6 feet, he was taller than Daddy and me and a whole lot better looking. Broad shoulders, square jaw. He had it all. Smart in school, too. Daddy laughed with him. They seemed at ease with each other, as though sometime when I hadn't taken notice, my brother had passed out of my world and into Daddy's. They knew the answer to this growing-up puzzle, but I'd never hear the end if I asked them to explain. Excuse me. On January 2nd, my family and Grady Hugh's girlfriend, Barbara Mitchell, walked Grady Hugh the half-mile downhill on the red clay road till we met the blacktop. He was headed back to Fort Stewart, Kentucky, before heading out to Korea. The day felt cold and gloomy. We stood in a kind of a circle where our road met the highway and watched for our postman, Mr. Harris, to come along. He'd always take you all the way into Dothan with him if he had the room. Grady Hugh'd catch the Greyhound there. I looked down at the Army issue boots my brother'd given me for Christmas and kicked a pine cone around with a heavy toe. Grady Hugh looked off into a low-lying fog that made it hard to see much past the road in front of us. I had the notion he was memorizing the way things looked. He put his arm around Barbara, And when the truck showed up, she pulled back and dabbed her eyes with a flowered hanky. Mama stood silent until he threw his duffel into the back with the mail sacks. After he slid himself into the seat up front, she handed him a package of her special tea cakes. Daddy reached in and shook my brother's shoulder like I'd seen him do with men his own age. I wished he'd ever do that to me without my having to enlist. Daddy'd never been in the Army, so that wasn't what made you a man, I knew. But he did seem to treat Grady Hugh better since he'd come home in a uniform. Always do right, son, Daddy said. Yes, sir. Right your mama. Daddy clapped his hand on Grady Hugh's back. And then, as though that were some ancient signal between men, Mr. Harris shifted the truck into gear, and he and my brother rode away into the mist and around the bend. I felt envy that he was getting away. Life there looked hopeless for people like us. Mama and Daddy had 5 children and owned only 20 acres of farmland. To get by, we sharecropped on another 60 acres, cotton, peanuts, and corn mostly. Lower Alabama was a world where you had no control over the outcome of your hard work. Didn't matter whether you were colored or white. You could be real smart and do everything right. But if that weather turned against you, you ended up poorer than when you started. All you could do until the next season was go without. Thank you.
I always tell everybody, including myself, to carry a notebook with you wherever you go. And if you don't, you can write on your hands, which I was doing over there because I forgot to say that after the reading, shortly after the Q&A, there'll be refreshments over here in the corner. The authors will be here to sign their books for you. The books are available out in the front, behind the desk. What else was I going to tell you? I was going to read, to be fair, and Peter didn't have his entry read, and I'm going to read it. Peter Denton is a molecular immunologist. In 1976, he sailed a 60-foot gaff-rigged schooner across the Pacific Ocean. Peter and members of his Oregon commune built it. He traveled widely in New Guinea, the Solomon Islands, and New Caledonia. He ran scientific expeditions throughout the area. His stories are based in real locations, and as in this instance, based on real people. His boat, Endurance, was lost in a hurricane. Putting his high seas adventures behind him, Peter returned to the U.S. to obtain his Ph.D. at UNC in Chapel Hill, and now he writes full-time. So, yeah, anyway, that's Peter. I mentioned Henry Greenberg earlier from the Writers Group, and I said he was in the first class I ever taught. Henry, by the way, I'm getting to another point. This is why I write novels instead of short stories. I have these digressions that I have to go on, and sometimes I make it back. But Henry, last week, 2 weeks ago, had sort of like emergency open heart surgery, unexpected, and he went in and he sent a note to the group after he was fine, better, and he sent a note that he was working on the revisions of his novel. The Plot Against the North, which we were reading, which I thought was great. In that same class was someone who would become a best-selling author, Barbara Parker, Suspicion of Innocence and so forth. It was in that very first class with Henry. She sat in the first seat here. He sat in the last seat over there. And after about 3 weeks, I realized that I think Barbara's smarter than I am. And I asked her if she would teach a class on whatever the topic was. I don't remember why I said she'll know more about this than I did. And she did. She came in with handouts, things on the board, everything. It was fabulous. Anyway, so writers, they're everywhere. And what I didn't know at that time, Barbara had told me that first class, I just quit my job as a lawyer to become a writer. And I said, whoa, that's okay, just quit it. Well, what I didn't know was that she had already written and published a novel, but was keeping it secret. It was a romance novel. Running Mates. The President and a Mistress or something like that going on anyway, but that was it. So anyway, so here we are. Do you have any questions for the writers or anything else? Just ask away. one at a time. Yeah,
The
Barrett.
stories that you guys read, were they workshopped like recently, or have you guys been like working on them for a while? And writing
This
them?
particular story was not workshop.
Oh. I started mine, working on mine when I was taking classes.
Yeah, I got a lot of criticism, which is different than from feedback.
On the work, or we did read that one, or at least I did. I don't know if it was what, huh?
You did.
Yeah, I don't know if it was workshopped did it get on the group or just.
Not in the group.
Yeah, I did, but I did. Yeah.
From the other angle of that, what's something somebody told you somewhere along the line that really helped you?
I can answer that. I went to the class after having met John in Stewart at a conference, and I thought what I was writing was pretty good. And I had been in critique groups which were little better than coffee clashes where we patted everybody on the head. And when I came in there, I got hit on the head with a 2x4. And it was the best advice that I ever got. And if I've done anything well at all, it's because Johnny and the gang play hardball. Say what?
What a specific piece of advice was?
Yes. He stood and looked to be kind away from me and said, information.
We don't. I think he means we get too much information on drama.
I can say very clearly, because Lynn, who's asking the question, was my plot teacher. And John also said it all the time, plot. Something's got to happen. Somebody's got to want something very badly and be willing to do whatever to get what they want. Have a plot.
And also, what I learned from Lynn Barrett in my conversations with her is that you need to ground your reader in where you are, because a lot of my writing had just been inner monologue and dialogue between people. And I learned from her actually to sort of like make a map, a physical visual map, whether you just do one phrase that grounds the reader, that is very helpful to both myself as a writer and the audience.
Few of the stories were written from the perspective of someone of the other sex. Was that done as a challenge, or was there a specific story that had to be told? What made that happen?
Well, I can answer that, and I hope you're not offended by the answer. The answer is that people who are oppressed are more interesting than people who aren't. For example, Donald Trump. And and I without knowledge or forethought, have written about 200,000 words, and the protagonists of virtually all of them are women, because women are more complex and more devious.
I don't want any part of that.
Well, John also always said, write about what you don't know about and what you want to find out about. So I don't know what it is to be a 13-year-old boy. And my husband did. And I was interested in his childhood, so I thought I would explore it through writing.
Yes.
Start from the back and work backward, or with an idea of how the story is going to end and then create it? Or do you start a character and let the character tell you where they're going?
Definitely the latter for me.
Both. Sometimes I know what the end is, and I write going in the past direction. And then sometimes I just sort of like say, this is an interesting character in an interesting place, and with a challenge, and I don't know where that challenge is going to take him or her. But I tend to write mainly men as my main characters.
What was the question? Oh, I often will start writing with just the slightest provocation. It might be a sentence or a phrase I overheard. It's not the smartest way to write. It often entails a lot of overwriting, but that's generally how things get started with me. And then once I discover a character and I have a notion of what kind of trouble I might get this character in, then it's best at that point to try and begin to plot the thing out.
Well, I think it's because of my scientific training, but I always start with facts, and all the people, or almost all of the people in my writing, are based on people that I knew. The islands that they've gone to are islands that I've gone to. And for example, in this story, there were two people on my boat who were outlandishly rich compared to the rest of us who were basically hippies. And after a short period of time, they told me that the reason that they had so much money is that they had grown a huge plot of marijuana on the slopes of Mauna Kea. And that's a lot to work with.
One more?
Do you find which is more challenging for you when you write, the actual creation of the actual writing, or the revision when you get something down? You know, is the revision part of it more challenging for you in the process, writing process?
I would say the revision process is more challenging, but Michelangelo would look at a piece of marble and he didn't know what he might end up with, but in the carving is where your discovery occurs.
I don't know. They're both difficult. I'm not sure. I don't find revision that maybe getting it right, but I don't dread it or dislike it or anything. I think maybe it feels better once I'm in revision.
I prefer revision. I really, really like that. It's like polishing a stone till it's highly glossy. It's just a lot of fun, and you already have enough there to work with.
I'd also like to add that this was finished maybe last year and went into production the end of the year. And when I read it again, I said, oh my God, I needed to revise it one more time. So revision is never over.
Yeah, Les Standiford said something once that always stuck with me about your last revision starts the minute you put it their letter in the envelope in the mailbox to send it to the publisher. You go, oh yes, I know.
There's also the revision after that's when you putting the pen to the paper for the first word. And I always imagine Melville going, call me Walter.
Well, it's hard to respond after something that witty, but for myself, I love words, and everything that I write, I use dragon, so I can talk right in sometimes. Now I can write everything just right off the top of my head, and then it's so much fun to go back and try and find the exact verb, the exact noun. Get rid of the adverbs, and keep in mind that the English language is the strongest language in the world. There are 250,000 words in the Oxford Dictionary.
Okay, thank you very much. Stay around and buy some books, get some
Thanks, folks. Before you get up, first of all, thank you to my authors. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you. To our publisher, this great work, thank you to him as well in Midtown Books. And also to our presenter and host, John Dufresne. Don't go anywhere. I would be totally remiss, from everything I've read of John's, it's no way that I could ever embarrass him, but I'm sure they're going to try like hell, because today is John's birthday. John today is years old, and and if you don't mind, I think it's in order. Wait, let me light it up. Hold on. And then you guys can eat and drink, and then we can all get plastered. Hold on. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear John. Happy birthday to you. Now you gotta blow it. You gotta blow it out and wish for a million seller. Yeah. Thanks everybody so much for coming. If you're watching online, give us a call. We'll get you a book signed. The authors will be sitting right here. The books are for sale behind the counter. Thank you so much for coming.